Elbaf might not just be the island where the Straw Hats finally meet the giants. It might be the island where One Piece finally explains what Nika really was. Because ever since Gear 5 was revealed, the story has treated Nika like more than a devil fruit name. Nika is a myth, a symbol, a rhythm, a laugh, a figure that slaves prayed to, that the world government tried to erase, and that somehow returned through Luffy. But here's the strange part. The rest of the world barely knows anything about Nika. The world government clearly knows enough to fear the name. The elders knew enough to hide the real name of Luffy's fruit. They knew enough to panic when it awakened. But the average person in the One Piece world does not seem to grow up hearing detailed stories about the sun god. So, if the truth about Nika survived anywhere, it would need to survive in a place the government could not easily control. A place with ancient traditions. A place with people who live far longer than humans. A place that already treats the sun like something sacred. That place is Elbaf. And that is why I think Elbaf is hiding the biggest Nika secret yet. Not just the secret of what Luffy's power can do. The secret of what Nika actually meant before the world was rewritten. Before we go further, this is a theory video. Some of this is grounded in what the story has already shown us, and some of it is connecting the dots. But the dots are getting very hard to ignore. Elbaf is not being built like a normal adventure island. The giants are not just another powerful race. They are one of the few cultures in One Piece that can remember history differently from everyone else. A human kingdom can lose records. A human ruler can be replaced. A human generation can be taught a new version of the past. But giants live for hundreds of years. That matters. If the world government erased a story 800 years ago, most human cultures would only have fragments left. Fairy tales, religious symbols, names with the meaning stripped away. But on Elbaf, a story can survive through people who heard it from someone who heard it from someone who might have lived close to the age when the truth was still fresh. That alone makes Elbaf dangerous. Not because the giants are strong, although they are. Elbaf is dangerous because it might remember, and the thing it remembers may be Nika. The first clue is the obvious one. Elbaf has always had sun imagery around it. Even before the current arc, One Piece connected the giants to festivals, old religion, and the idea of a sun god. Big Mom's past on Elbaf was not just there to show us why the giants hate her. It also showed us that Elbaf had traditions older and stranger than most islands in the story. That matters more now, because we know the words sun god are not random in One Piece. They point directly at the most forbidden myth in the world. When the story says sun god now, we cannot treat it like background flavor. The moment Nika was revealed, every old sun reference changed shape. Skalpia changed. Fishman Island changed. The Dawn changed. And Elbaf changed too. Because Elbaf is not just a strong warrior kingdom. It is an ancient culture built around myth, honor, giants, trees, and the sky. It feels like the kind of place where a god would not be explained through a history book. It would be explained through a story, a festival, a song, a mural, a warning. And that is where Loki becomes so interesting. Loki is not just another villain with a royal title. He is tied to Elbaf's throne, tied to the giant royal family, and tied to the idea of someone claiming or twisting a divine role. In mythology, Loki is a trickster figure. In One Piece, names usually matter. Oda does not choose a name like Loki by accident. So, when Elbaf brings in a giant prince connected to a forbidden or dangerous version of the sun god idea, I do not think the point is just, here is a strong guy for Luffy to fight. I think Loki might be the false Nika, or at least, the story's warning about false liberation. That sounds dramatic, but think about what Nika represents. Nika is freedom. Nika is laughter. Nika is the warrior who makes people smile. But those ideas can be twisted. A ruler can call himself a liberator while trying to control everyone. A prince can claim to be chosen by a god while using that myth to gain power. A kingdom can worship the sun while forgetting what the sun was supposed to stand for. That might be the point of Loki. He may not be the real secret. He may be the fake version standing in front of it. Because the biggest Nika secret probably is not, there was a strong sun god and Luffy inherited his fruit. We already know that. The bigger secret is what Nika meant to the people who believed in him. Was Nika a real person from the Void Century? Was Nika a god invented by enslaved people to survive? Was Nika a title passed from person to person? Or was Nika the name people gave to anyone who brought laughter to the oppressed? That last possibility is the one I think Elbaf may reveal. Nika might not be important because he was worshipped. Nika might be important because he was remembered. That would explain why the world government fears the fruit so much. If the Nika fruit was only a powerful combat ability, the government would still want it. But they would treat it like any other dangerous fruit. Instead, they changed its name. That is the key. They did not just fail to capture it, they hid what it was. They wanted the world to think it was just the gum-gum fruit. Why? Because a power can be dangerous, but a symbol is worse. If people know the warrior of liberation can return, then every slave, every prisoner, every kingdom under pressure, and every person waiting for the dawn has something to believe in. That is what the government cannot allow. And Elbaf may be the place where that belief never fully died. This is where the giants' long lives become one of the most important pieces of the final saga. The world government can burn books, they can erase islands, they can rename devil fruits, they can outlaw research into the void century. But erasing a giant culture is harder. You are not just erasing paper, you are erasing living memory. That could be why Elbaf has always felt separate from the rest of the world. The government wants control over the seas, the kings, the marines, the information, and the story everyone is allowed to know. But Elbaf has its own story. And if that story says Nika was real, or that Nika's will is older than the world government, then Elbaf becomes more than an island. It becomes evidence. There is also a reason this has to happen now. Luffy already has Gear 5. So Elbaf does not need to be about him getting the power. It needs to be about him understanding the meaning. That is a very different kind of progression. In Wano, Luffy awakened the fruit without knowing its true name. He became the sun god Nika without even trying to become a god. He was just Luffy. He laughed, he fought, he freed people. He turned the battle into something ridiculous and impossible. And that is exactly why he fits Nika. But the story still has not let Luffy fully process what that means. Luffy does not want to be a chosen one. He does not want to be worshipped. He does not want a destiny speech. So if Elbaf teaches him about Nika, it cannot be in a way that turns him into a serious messiah. It has to be something Luffy can understand. Not, you are a god, but people have been waiting for someone who makes the world free enough to laugh again. That is the version that fits One Piece. And that might be the real Nika secret. Nika is not a crown. Nika is not a throne. Nika is not a person demanding worship. Nika is a promise. The promise that no matter how dark the world becomes, someone will eventually dance in front of the oppressor and make fear look stupid. That is why the drums matter. The drums of liberation are not just a heartbeat sound effect, they feel like a signal. A rhythm that tells people the old story is alive again. And where would that rhythm be understood best? On an island of giants with ancient songs, ancient festivals, and a culture built around legends. Elbaf might be the first place where Luffy's heartbeat is not treated as a strange new power. It might be treated as something familiar. Something their ancestors warned them about, or prayed for. That would be a huge moment. Imagine Luffy using Gear 5 on Elbaf, and the giants do not just react to the strength. They know the sound. They have a word for it. They have an old story about it. And suddenly, Luffy realizes his power is connected to something much older than himself. That does not take away from Luffy. It actually makes him more Luffy. Because Luffy has never needed to understand history in order to change it. He just acts. He sees someone trapped and breaks the cage. He sees someone crying and punches the person responsible. But the final saga is forcing the world to understand why that matters. Luffy is not important because he wants to save the world. He is important because every island he saves becomes proof that the government's version of the world is a lie. And Elbaf may be the island that says the lie began 800 years ago. The royal history of Elbaf matters, because royal families in One Piece often carry hidden information. Alabasta had the poneglyph. Fishman Island had Joy Boy's apology. Wano had Pluton and the Kozuki clan. Zo had the road poneglyph and a direct connection to the Void Century. So if Elbaf's royal line is being emphasized, it probably is not just politics. There may be something in the giant royal family that connects the island to the old world. Maybe Harald knew part of the truth. Maybe Loki twisted it. Maybe Elbaf's throne was never just a throne. Maybe the king of the giants was supposed to protect a story the world government could never let spread. And if that story involves Nika, then the conflict on Elbaf becomes much bigger than Luffy versus a giant prince. It becomes a fight over who gets to define liberation. That is perfect for One Piece. Because the series has always contrasted real freedom with fake freedom. Doflamingo called Dressrosa peaceful, while controlling it with strings. Kaido talked about strength, while turning Wano into a prison. The world government talks about justice, while protecting slavery, censorship, and celestial power. So Elbaf could give us the sun-themed version of that same idea. There is the real Nika, laughter, freedom, liberation, and joy. And there is the fake Nika, worship, control, chosen bloodlines, and power wearing the mask of freedom. If Loki is connected to that fake version, then Luffy defeating him would not just be a fight. It would be a correction. He would prove what Nika means by refusing to act like a god. That is the most Luffy thing possible. The world government side of this is just as important. If Elbaf really has Nika information, then the government cannot ignore it anymore. For most of the story, Elbaf felt like a faraway dream island. Usopp wanted to go there. The giants were legendary. It was powerful, but distant. Now, in the final saga, every distant thing is becoming relevant. The ancient weapons, the Void Century, the true history, Joy Boy, Nika, the giants. All of those pieces are moving toward the same place. So when the government gets involved with Elbaf, it is probably not only because the giants are useful soldiers.